Hey everybody, what's up? My name is Vince, and this is my YouTube channel. It's for middle school teachers teaching and making their way through the Next Generation Science Standards. I've done Next Generation Science Standards for a while, and I've taught them in many different ways, where we've taught them all in one thing, and where we've taught them as integrated. And so I'm just kind of letting you know how I do that. Maybe offer some tips and some tricks, and maybe some labs and things you can do along the way, activities you can do along the way to help the students grasp it and to do what the students are trying to do. So what I did, I'll just let you know right now, I envision this kind of like a podcast where I'm just going to kind of start talking, and I'll tell you what we do, and I don't want to have to go through and do a lot of editing, or I'll never get it done. I'll never do anything. So I'm going to try and go through and not edit very much. So please forgive the mistakes. So what I did last episode was I said, here's the way that I start Earth science. I don't do space at first. I put that at the end, and I start off with saying, here's the Earth, and here's how the Earth formed, and here's why we think the Earth formed this way. And I show them the layers of Earth, and we go through. I went through how to make models of that and demonstrate how the heat affects the layers of the Earth. And I will say, I thought about it afterwards, and I've actually done this a couple different ways. Sometimes I start off with that because I want to start off with my story, I guess is what we'll say. My story starts off with how the Earth formed. And sometimes I start off with this lesson right here, because in this lesson what we're getting at is just looking around and gathering evidence. And that's going to be a big deal in science, as it should be, and in NGSS, which is just looking at the data out there and figuring out what does that mean. So what we're doing is today we're going to look at what is NGSS 2.3. These all are taught together, by the way. You can't really teach just one and neglect the others. But I do think 2.3 is a good place to start. That is about plate tectonics. Now, if you look at the performance expectation and you read the things that go along with it, it is not about what happens during plate tectonics. And we often teach that this is a convergent boundary, that's a divergent boundary, this is transform. What it's actually looking at is it's looking at the evidence. What kind of evidence do we have for plate tectonics? And what that means is if you just looked at the Earth, which is what scientists did, by the way. This was something, the history of this is actually pretty cool, right? That we just started learning about this 70 years ago when we started teaching it in classrooms. If you just looked at the Earth and looked at the evidence there, you can kind of figure out what's happening. And that's exactly what happened, and that's what you want your students to do. And so let me show you how I do that. I first give them a map, and I'm going to show you this, by the way. This is something that I sell on Teachers Pay Teachers, but you don't have to buy it in order to get what I'm about to give you out of it. So this isn't just one long sales speech. It's not very expensive anyway, but like I'm not going to be a millionaire off of you buying that. In fact, probably if you email me, I'll just email it to you. But this is something that I created. I give them a map. By the way, before I created this, I just put a map on the board. And then I just asked students questions and they wrote them down. But I give students a map, and I'll say, the first thing I want you to do is I just want you to go through and I want you to plot volcanoes and earthquakes. So here's my earthquakes, and you'll go through your map and you'll look for the latitude and longitude. And this is by far not a whole lot of them. I just have just a few here and there. And what's going to end up happening is it's going to end up making the shape of plates. So the students don't know that yet, but they'll discover that later, that these are making the shape of the plates. And then I'll say, here's what I want you to look at of these three mountains: the Grampian Mountains, the Appalachian Mountains, and the Atlas Mountains. Now I have the students look this up, but you can just tell them where they are. And what they end up finding out is that the Grampian Mountains are located up here in Switzerland. And the Appalachian Mountains are right here in the United States, and the Little Atlas Mountains are located here in Africa. And they're made of the same type of rock. They are the same age. And so the students might start figuring out, well, what does that mean? What does it mean that all of these are located on different continents, but they're all the same age and they're all made of the same kind of rock? Are all mountains always made of the same type of rock? No. Are they all the same age? No. But these three happen to be. And students might start getting a feel for, well, maybe they're all the same mountain range. okay? Next thing I do is I have them go on their map and they find out where some fossils were found. This fossil I actually can't pronounce, the Synagnathus. But it was a dinosaur that lived around 250 million years ago, and I had them look up some countries, and they plot out those countries, and what they find out is that it lived right here in South America. It also lived right here in Africa, and there's also places over here where it lived, but the students will start seeing that if you put these together, they fit together, like the continents, they'll be right there next to each other. Okay, and so we do that with a couple of different fossils. So that really does our fossil and our rock evidence. We have fossils and rock evidence that the continents used to all be connected and they're moving around, and that's what we're trying to get at here. Don't rush into giving them the answer, right? What I do in my own class when I teach this, I have them put down all the evidence and I don't tell them anything. And then I start asking them questions. Why do you think that? Or how did this get here? And some of them, and eventually someone will say, well, whoa, look at that. They fit together. Like it looks like they all go together. I have them next plot some countries for glacial deposits. So if you don't know what a glacial deposit is or a glacial striation, basically when glaciers form, snow stacks up and stacks up and stacks up, and it makes all this on the bottom ice, and it turns to ice, and that's a huge glacier. Well, the snow on the bottom starts to melt, and the glacier starts to slide downhill. As the glaciers move, they start to rub up against the bottom of the earth, and they scrape into it and pick up debris, pick up sediments, and that's called a glacial striation. And then when they melt, they leave all that stuff piled up, okay, and that's called a glacial deposit. Well, we have evidence of these glacial deposits and glacial striations in South America, in the southernmost part of Africa, the southernmost part of India, and in Australia. Well, what's weird about that? So students just I have them put a G in all these places right here, and what they'll start noticing is that it's weird because it should be hot right here, right? That's the equator, okay? And then I also let them know there are fossils that we found, and I don't believe I've actually put this on this worksheet or not, but in the Netherlands, we actually have found fossils of tropical forests. So, well, that's weird because it's cold up there, right? This is in the poles and it's cold, and we found tropical forests up there. Wouldn't it be neat, right, if everything was just shifted down a little bit? Okay, and so your glaciers are now next to your poles, and your tropical forest is now next to your equator. And so those are the kind of things that we want them to figure out. Finally, I'll also have them draw in the mid-ocean ridge. And once you do that, you start to see the mid-ocean ridge is the exact same shape as the continents. So if the continents, that's weird, right? Like, why would they be the same age, or not, the same shape as the continents? It's almost as if the continents went together, that's where they would meet. And so that's evidence for something. Something's happening that did that. That this huge mountain range or this huge ridge is located right in the middle of South America and Africa, and it happens to be the same shape as both of their shorelines. So anyway, that is the evidence that you can present. Once I'm done with this, I'll have them draw out the whole plate. So I give them plates also, and I'll have them draw the plates on their map, and so they can start seeing, well, it's not just the continents that are moving, but they'll start seeing plates exist. So there's actually, it makes it kind of real to them also that there are actually, like, underneath the ocean, there's an ocean floor, okay? And then I'll also point out that I'll show them pictures of the continental, wow, I'm drawing a blank. Continental ridge, the continental shelf. The continental shelf, if you don't know what that is, it is, if you have, here is South America, then you have, if you go to the beach, like you're walking into the water, but there's a beach there, and that thing can go out for miles, and it's actually a shelf that surrounds all the continents. And so when you put the continents together, they look like they fit, but they don't fit perfectly. But when you put them together with the continental shelves, you get a much more perfect fit. And so that's why the continental shelves are important. Okay, So we've gone through that performance expectation, and what hopefully you got out of this is, and what your students will get, is how we came up with this theory. That through fossils and rocks, fossils in these fossils that are found on one continent and another. You can also look at like the Mesosaurus or the Glossopteris, all those fossils were found on 2 different continents far away from each other. That's the fossil evidence. We also have fossil evidence in those trees, right, that were in the north pole and should be around along the equator. With rocks, we've gone through, we have our 3 mountain ranges. They're made of rocks and they should be together. We also have the striations and the deposits made by glaciers that should be more south. Then we also went through the shape of ocean structures, which is the mid-ocean ridge. Okay, and then you might also point out that we have trenches also, and if you point out a map of the trenches, the trench shape is the shape of the continents. So that's kind of weird also. And then the last thing is, I pointed out, we have this continental shelf, and that makes the continents fit together a lot easier. So those are all ways to teach this, and then let students realize on their own the continents are moving. If they don't do it, eventually you're going to tell them, hey, it's something like, wouldn't it be weird if some of the continents move? And then what I do after that, once we get it, once we see the continents moving, I'll look up on YouTube and I'll search for something that looks like a time lapse or an animation of the continents moving. Okay, and remember, I keep saying continents moving. Remember, it's the whole plate that's moving. And so I'll watch one of those, and the kids really like that when they can see over time it's all moving, and then finally it shows Pangea, and then it'll show them split apart from each other. And sometimes you can find some good ones will have like different colors for the different continents and show how they form. So that's something I do to wrap up this lesson, to show them, yes, all of these plates are moving. They've been moving throughout time. They're going to keep moving. And then finally, you may actually get a question, and you will. Somebody will say, well, how do we know this is happening or something? We're pretty, like right now, we know, we can just send satellites up into space and we can easily measure the distance between 2 points, and we can tell how fast they're moving. But what's amazing is that they didn't have this in the 60s and 70s. And so you might even go into the story of how this was figured out, which is something I'll go into in our next episode, which makes it all the more interesting. They just scienced it. All right, I hope that helps. I'll see you next time.